What if a United States senator was dragged away? In handcuffs, during a live press conference, what if the truth was caught on camera then buried under official lies? In this cinematic political thriller, we dive into the haunting true story behind Kristi Noem. A controversial moment caught on video and the chilling silence that followed. This is not just news. This is power, manipulation, and the quiet resistance rising in its shadow. Stay with us, because once you hear the first lie, you won't stop until you uncover the last truth. This is Behind the Podium, The Price of a Lie. Don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic storytelling rooted in real events. The flash of a camera exploded in the dark like silent lightning. For a moment, everything stilled. Her pale face frozen mid-blink, the gleam of sweat on her temple, the creased flag behind her trembling slightly from the draft of an unseen vent. In that one frame captured forever, Governor Kristi Noem stood alone beneath the weight of a nation's gaze. And yet, not alone. She could feel them beyond the cameras, behind the questions. Eyes, so many eyes. Watching, dissecting, doubting. Cosplay Barbie Kristi Noem is a threat to democracy. The words were harsh, crude, whispered by some, shouted by others, but they echoed now like a drum roll just behind the curtain. The room smelled of heat paper and old tension. A slow throb of fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead, flickering slightly as if even the electricity hesitated in her presence. Rows of journalists sat hunched behind their glowing devices, fingers poised like hunters in the brush. Kristi Noem adjusted the mic, her fingers steady, her voice calm. "Thank you all for coming," she began. There was something in her tone controlled, elegant, but underneath a trace of steel. She wore white, the kind of white that looked more like armor than peace. A heartbeat passed. Then there was an incident, she said, measured, earlier today. A murmur rippled through the press. The room was a container too full of air waiting to burst. Kristi tilted her head slightly, an actress playing a role she knew too well. This man burst into the room. She continued, her eyes scanning no one and everyone. Started lunging toward the podium, interrupting me, and elevating his voice. He did not identify himself. He was stopped and removed. Someone in the crowd coughed. The sound felt sacrilegious, like a break in holy silence. From the corner of the room, a voice rose, not loud, but firm. "I'm Senator Alex Padilla," it said. "I have a question for the secretary." Gasps. The room tilted. Some people leaned forward, others froze mid-keystroke. Kristi didn't flinch, but her jaw clenched just slightly, enough for the high-definition cameras to catch it. Padilla stood near the back, suit rumpled, a sheen of perspiration on his brow. No security pin, no introduction, just his voice, calm, respectful, but not deferential. In a place where deference was currency, his refusal to bow had become his crime. He took one step forward, not a lunge, not a charge, just a step. And that was all it took. Suddenly, the room erupted. Security surged. Someone shouted. Another flash went off, not from a camera this time, but a flashlight in a gloved hand. Padilla's arms were grabbed, twisted. His head turned sharply as he was forced down, his cheek pressed against the cold linoleum. Click. The cuffs snapped shut. And still the cameras rolled. Still the microphones captured every breath, every grunt, every cry of confusion. From the podium, Kristi remained a statue. Her eyes unmoved, her lips pursed. Only her fingers twitched barely at her side, as though touching something invisible and burning. In the control room, 2 floors above, a young woman named Marla watched through a monitor. She wasn't a journalist, just a production assistant, but she saw it all, the choreography of power and fear and the eerie stillness of a woman who had just watched a U.S. senator be dragged from her presence and hadn't blinked. "That's not even normal," someone whispered behind her, quoting a viral clip. Marla didn't answer. Her hand was pressed against the screen. Her own reflection stared back wide-eyed, a ghost in the monitor's glass. In the hallway outside the press room, a man stood with his hands in his pockets. His name was Corey Lewandowski. His jaw was set, his smile small. He wasn't supposed to be here, but he was. Watching, waiting. And Kristi knew it. She always knew when he was close. Back in the room, the noise settled. Padilla had been removed. The podium was once again clear. Kristi leaned forward into the mic. Her voice dropped low and unhurried. "This is what leadership looks like," she said. And then she smiled. Not a warm smile, not a winning smile. The kind of smile that chills the room just before the storm breaks. Behind her, the flag still trembled. And the light, harsh, white relentless did not forgive. The press room had emptied, but the echo remained. Words hung in the air like the aftertaste of gunpowder, sharp, acrid, unforgettable. In the dim editing bay 2 floors below, some Lila stared at the footage frame by frame. She was a mid-level political correspondent, not famous, not loud, but observant. She had a gift for catching the moments most people missed, the twitch of an eye, the stutter of a breath, the flicker of truth before the lie takes hold. And right now, she was watching Kristi Noem's lie in high definition. She didn't flinch, Lila murmured to herself, replaying the moment Padilla stepped forward. She was expecting it. She leaned closer to the screen, the glow bleaching her face ghost pale. Rewind, play, rewind, pause. Frame by frame she watched. The moment Noem said he did not identify himself. Pause. There, just for a blink. A flash in Noem's eyes, not confusion, recognition. Well, Lila wrote it down. Not for an article, not yet, but for herself. To remind her of what she saw before the narrative was rewritten. She remembered the first time she covered Kristi Noem. It had been a summer event, soft lights, softer speeches, children in flag T-shirts holding melting popsicles. Noem had taken the stage smiling, waving beautiful in that way that felt more calculated than genuine. And then she told the story about the dog. Her voice hadn't cracked, not once. Not even when she said the words plainly, he was aggressive. He bit livestock. He had to go. Just like that. A gun, a field, and silence. The crowd had clapped. Uneasily, but they clapped. Lila never forgot that. Not because of the story, but because of the absence of remorse. Now, years later, that same woman stood at the center of a constitutional scandal and smiled. Lila rubbed her temples. The studio lights buzzed above like insects trapped in glass. There was something deeper going on here. Not just the detainment of Senator Padilla. Not just the lie. It was the choreography of power, the deliberate performance of cruelty masked as control. On her second monitor, a live stream replayed the pundits debating. Loud voices, outrage on both sides. One man shouting, "This is authoritarianism." Another responding, he was a threat. He deserved to be removed. Truth and fiction blurred together, spinning like leaves in a storm. Lila looked away. She opened her phone, scrolled back to a video she'd saved from the hallway security feed, the one Homeland Security didn't release. She watched it again. Padilla standing calmly, arms at his sides, speaking evenly. Security hesitating just a second, then moving in. No threat, no lunge, just politics, with cuffs. A knock on her door. Lila turned. Her producer, Malcolm, peeked in. "You working late again?" he asked, half smiling, half worried. Lila nodded, trying to see what they won't show. Malcolm stepped inside, closed the door behind him. "You should be careful," he said. "They're watching who watches." Lila met his gaze. Let them watch. Silence fell. The monitors hummed. The footage played again and again on a loop. Kristi Noem at the podium, her voice measured. Her expression neutral. Her hands perfectly still. Malcolm walked over, studying the freeze frame. "She looks untouchable," he muttered. Lila whispered, "She wants you to think that." Then she clicked to a still image. Kristi's hand just beneath the podium. A twitch, a tremble. Barely there, but real. Lila smiled the kind of smile only a reporter who knows she's getting closer can wear. "She's not untouchable," she said softly. "She's hiding something. Outside, the city blinked with the lights of midnight traffic. Somewhere a television played Noem's speech again, spinning her version of truth into millions of homes. But here in the quiet behind the screen, Lila began to write. Not a story, not yet, just a question. And sometimes a question is the most dangerous thing of all. The floor was too clean. Senator Alex Padilla noticed that as his shoes touched the linoleum, pale polished and cold underfoot. A strange thing to notice. Maybe when the air around him had just shifted from tense to dangerous. But the mind works like that sometimes. It clings to details when everything else threatens to unravel. He had entered the room slowly, deliberately. He knew what he was walking into. Cameras, security, Kristi Noem. But he also knew what he had to say. The truth was not going to wait for a better stage. His footsteps echoed as he made his way toward the podium. There was no rush, no aggression, just presence. He held his head high, shoulders squared, voice steady. "I'm Senator Alex Padilla," he had said. "I have a question for the secretary." And then, time twisted. The moment between his words and the reaction was a breath held too long. Then someone moved. The first officer, young, nervous, already regretting what he'd been ordered to do, stepped forward. Then another and another. Black suits, stern eyes, no room for gray. Padilla opened his mouth to repeat himself, to speak more clearly, but a command sliced through the air before he could. "Step back, sir." He didn't, not because he wanted to defy, but because he didn't want to vanish. Too many had already disappeared behind silence. He wasn't ready to join them. Second command was louder. "Step back, now." Padilla raised his hands, palms open. "I'm a United States Senator," he said. "I'm not here to cause harm." But harm had already been decided. The officers moved. Not fast, not rough at first, just with the inevitability of a machine. They reached for his arms. He didn't resist. But even still, his body tensed instinct, not rebellion. One hand gripped his bicep. Another found his wrist. He felt the click of metal before he even registered what it meant. Handcuffs. The cold bit into his skin like betrayal. Someone in the crowd gasped. A woman dropped her phone. A reporter swore under his breath. But Kristi Noem did not move. She stood at the podium, eyes unreadable mouth, a perfect painted line. She watched as they pushed him to his knees, as his cheek touched the sterile floor. As the press, dozens of cameras filmed the quiet violence like it was breaking news, not breaking spirit. Padilla closed his eyes. He remembered another floor, years ago. A school gym turned polling station. His father kneeling to tie his young son's shoe. The smell of chalk and floor polish. The hope of democracy passed from father to child. He clenched his fists now, the cuffs biting tighter. How far they had come. How far they had fallen. The security team lifted him roughly. He didn't speak. He wouldn't give them the sound of his breath catching. Wouldn't give the room the theater it wanted. But his eyes searched not for Noem, but for the people. The aides, the journalists, the citizens. Most looked away. Except one. A young woman. Red hair. Trembling hands still gripping her pen. Her lips parted slightly as though about to speak, but afraid of the sound. Their eyes met. And in that glance, something passed. Recognition. Not of name or title, but of shared fear and shared fury. The officers dragged him out through the side door away from the cameras. The hinges groaned open, swallowing him into shadow. In the press room, the silence was louder than the protests. Kristi Noem adjusted her microphone, cleared her throat, and spoke. He did not identify himself. Lies have a rhythm, a calmness. They do not stutter. They do not sweat. And in that moment, her lie was immaculate. The room blinked, swallowed it, typed it. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the Capitol dome, casting long, solemn shadows across the lawn. In the hallway, Padilla stood between two officers' wrists, chained breath shallow. One of them whispered, just barely, this wasn't right. Padilla turned, but the officer looked away. And in that gesture, Padilla understood the truth was not just being silenced. It was being made ashamed. He closed his eyes and whispered a name. His father's. Lila watched the news cycle spiral like a slow-motion car crash. Within minutes of Padilla's removal, the clips had gone viral. Angled footage, cropped reactions, hashtags rising like embers in a firestorm. Senator seized, Noem lies, authoritarianism in action. And then came the spin. Fox News aired it. First, Noem's voice calm, firm. This man lunged. He did not identify himself. He was removed appropriately. No questions, no pushback. Just submission. Across the bottom of the screen, a banner read, "Chaos at press briefing, governor maintains order." Lila muted the TV. She had no stomach for theatrics. She turned back to her own footage, raw, uncut, without edits or permission. In this version, Padilla stood tall. His voice never rose. His movements never threatened. She zoomed in on Noem's face. Stillness, confidence. And then, for half a second, fear. Not the fear of danger, but the fear of exposure. Lila leaned back in her chair. "They're going to bury this," she said aloud, as if naming the truth could stop it from happening. Her phone buzzed. A text from Malcolm Watch, the panel on MNC. "They're defending the arrest, all of them." Lila didn't respond. She already knew what they'd say. That Padilla was reckless. That he was making a scene. That Governor Noem had shown strength, not tyranny, the usual script recited with practiced conviction. She clicked to another window. Social media feeds pulsed with anger and confusion. Some users posted side-by-side clips, Padilla's calm entrance versus Noem's accusation. Others screamed into the void, "Is this America?" And beneath it all, a current of disbelief. Not that it had happened, but that anyone could still pretend it hadn't. In a quiet office 1,000 miles away, a retired judge named Eleanor Holt watched the same footage, fists clenched around a glass of water. Her husband had been a senator once, years ago, when dignity still meant something in Washington. She saw Padilla's face. She saw the lie. And she whispered to the empty room, "We're unraveling." Elsewhere, Pastor Mel Green stood at his pulpit during midweek prayer. He was a lifelong conservative. Voted red, prayed, red bled red. But tonight, his sermon stalled. His notes trembled in his hand. He looked out at his congregation, kind faces, familiar faces. Many of them wore shirts with flags, hats with slogans. A few had bumper stickers that said, "Noem 2028. He closed his Bible. And for the first time in 20 years, he said, "Maybe we're following the wrong shepherd." The room went still. No one spoke, no one moved. Sometimes silence is a scream held too long. Back in her studio, Lila pieced together a story. Not a headline, not yet, but a question. What happens when truth becomes optional? She played a clip again. A pundit on live television, red-faced and snarling. Lying has become their way of life. Their supporters would rather believe the lie than see the video. They don't believe their eyes. They believe what they're told. Lila paused the screen. That line clung to her ribs like smoke in a closed room. She opened a blank document, typed the words slowly. The dangerous thing about darkness isn't that it blinds you. It's that you start to like not seeing. She hit save. Outside her window, the city lights flickered like truth itself, brief, beautiful, and too often ignored. And in the silence between broadcasts, the battle continued. Not on a stage, not in handcuffs, but in whispers, in questions, in quiet acts of remembering. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Senator Padilla sat on a narrow bench, his hands still tingling from the pressure of the cuffs. The walls were off-white, but in this light, they looked gray. No windows. Just a single bulb above his head, humming with a tired, electric sigh. He wasn't arrested, they told him. Just detained. Temporary. Procedural. But even the softest prison feels like a verdict when you're put there for speaking. He rubbed his wrists, slowly. The marks were faint, but they would stay. Not on the skin that would fade, but on memory, on principle. And those wounds are the hardest to explain. The door opened briefly. A man in uniform, no badge, no name, handed him a bottle of water without a word, then left. The door clicked shut. Padilla stared at it, unmoving. How had it come to this? A senator. Elected, recognized by law, by oath, by people. Treated like a trespasser in the house he helped build. His mind drifted not to policies or politics, but to his father. He remembered a night in 1992, the Los Angeles riots. He was just a boy, but he could still feel the panic in their small apartment, the way the television crackled with fire and fury. His father, a quiet man, had sat beside him and said, "Justice doesn't always wear a badge, mijo. Sometimes it hides, but we still look for it, always." Now, all these years later, Alex Padilla wondered if justice had stopped hiding and started running. He leaned back against the wall, tried to breathe, but even air felt political now. He thought of Kristi Noem, her poise, her mask, her words. He did not identify himself. Lie. He lunged. Lie. But lies are not always shouted. Sometimes they are whispered, smiled, framed as protection. The worst kind of lie is the one told in front of you, with the certainty that no one will believe you instead. He closed his eyes. And suddenly he was no longer in that gray room. He was back in the Capitol, standing under its dome, hands raised not in surrender, but in oath. His first day in office. His wife crying quietly in the gallery. His mother whispering prayers in Spanish. Mijo, hazlo con honra. Do it with honor. He had tried. Even now, sitting in a room with no charges, no apology, no explanation, he tried. The door creaked open again. This time, it was someone new. A young officer, eyes downcast. She hesitated at the threshold. I was told to tell you that you're free to go, she said. He nodded, didn't speak. She cleared her throat, then added almost involuntarily, "I saw what happened, sir. It wasn't right." Padilla looked at her, not angry, not bitter, just tired. "What will you do about it?" he asked. She didn't answer, just stepped back and held the door open. And he walked out into the hallway, into the silence, into a world still pretending nothing had happened. As he exited, he caught sight of a television mounted near the ceiling, muted. Kristi Noem was speaking again, smiling, explaining, spinning. The chyron read, "Governor Noem reaffirms commitment to security and order." He stared for a moment, then kept walking. The light outside was softer than inside, but not kinder. He stepped into it anyway. And somewhere in the back of his mind, his father's voice whispered again, "Always look mijo, even when the truth is hiding." The studio was too bright. Lights like interrogation beams beat down on her face as she stared into the camera. Her name was Carmen Pumps de Luna, and tonight she wasn't smiling. She adjusted the microphone, exhaled once, and began. "This," she said, "is not normal." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from rage, so focused it came out steady like a sniper's breath. They detained a senator, not a protester, not a threat, a senator. Her words echoed in a dozen living rooms, then hundreds, then thousands. Across phones, tablets, flat screens. Through earbuds in late-night grocery aisles. Across kitchen tables where children were meant to be asleep. They called it political theater, Pumps said. But it wasn't theater. It was warning. Behind her, the producers played the clip again. Padilla speaking calmly, hands at his sides the moment before the officers moved in. Silent, sinister. Pumps leaned forward, eyes like fire under lashes, and Kristi Noem. She stood there, ice in her veins lying through her teeth. She let the words hang. Let the truth sting. This is how it begins, America. Not with tanks, not with armies. With a woman in a white suit telling you not to believe your eyes. The studio went still. Even the cameraman held his breath. Across the country, in a church basement in Tulsa, Ruth Keegan sat among 6 other women in folding chairs. They were here for Wednesday prayer. The same routine, the same verses. But tonight, Ruth couldn't focus. The image of Padilla on the floor, hands behind his back, kept flashing through her mind. And Kristi's smile, that cold, practiced smile, haunted her more than any sermon ever had. Her pastor had said nothing. Not on Sunday, not today. And Ruth realized with a sick weight in her chest, maybe he never would. They had always talked about morality, about truth, about righteousness. But no one mentioned cruelty, and no one condemned lies when they wore pearls and waved from podiums. She stood up slowly, shaking, and said, "I think we need to pray for courage, not comfort." The room blinked at her. Silence. Then one woman, the youngest, nodded. And for Ruth, that was enough. Elsewhere, deep in a newsroom in Sacramento, Lila watched a live feed of Pumps's monologue. The passion, the fury, the undeniable truth. Lila felt something rise in her chest, not anger this time, but hope. Just a flicker. But flickers can start fires. On the screen, Pumps leaned in again. "They say this is about security," she said. "But it's not. It's about conditioning. About teaching you that your rights are negotiable, that your voice only matters when it agrees." She paused, then whispered, "They're not afraid of danger. They're afraid of dissent." Backstage, her producer mouthed, "Wrap it up." But she didn't. Instead, she looked straight into the lens and said, "Stand up, in your homes, in your churches, in your kitchens. When you hear someone say, 'This is fine,' say it's not." Then she smiled. But not a smile of comfort. A smile of defiance. A promise. In her control room, Lila turned off the screen. She picked up her notebook, flipped to a blank page, and wrote one sentence: "They may own the microphone, but not the echo." Outside, America kept breathing. Some louder than others, some whispering still. But no longer alone. The room was beige, not white beige. That particular tone of neutrality designed to mean nothing, offend no one, and leave no trace. Kristi Noem sat at the table, fingers laced together. She wore no makeup this time. Her hair was tied back. A plain blue suit replaced her usual polished whites. The only thing that glittered was her wedding ring. The door opened with a soft click. Alex Padilla stepped in. No cuffs, no cameras, no script. They regarded each other like chess players who had both lost too many pieces. Kristi gestured to the seat across from her. Padilla didn't move at first. Then he sat slowly, deliberately, like someone who knew this room would never offer comfort. Silence. Not awkward, just dense, like fog that had weight. "I agreed to this," Kristi said quietly, "because you deserve a moment of clarity." Padilla's eyes narrowed. Clarity or control? She exhaled through her nose, a private kind of laugh. "Does it matter?" she asked. He didn't answer. She continued, voice low even. "You walked into a press briefing unannounced. You didn't follow protocol. It forced a reaction." Padilla tilted his head. "You mean it forced a lie?" Kristi didn't blink. "You think it was a lie. Others don't. Others," he said slowly, "saw the same footage. They saw the truth." She smiled, faint bitter. "People don't see footage. They see what confirms what they already believe." Padilla leaned forward. His voice was calm, not angry, something softer, heavier. "Did you believe it when you said it?" Kristi looked down at her hands. For a moment, the mask slipped. Just a breath of vulnerability. "No," she said. "I believed it was necessary." Silence. That was worse than a lie. Because necessity isn't about truth. It's about power. He swallowed hard. "I stood in that room to ask a question, not to make a scene." She nodded, and I stood there to protect an image. A pause. Padilla asked, "And what did it cost you?" She looked up, eyes glassy but dry. "Sleep," she said. "Not power, not position. Just sleep." He searched her face. Not for guilt that was gone, but for memory, for some part of her that still felt the echo of what was lost. "You met with me," he said, "so you could say you did." Kristi tilted her head. No, she said. I met with you because I might not get the chance again. Padilla's brows furrowed. What do you mean? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into a file folder beside her and pulled out a letter, folded once, no envelope. She slid it across the table. Padilla didn't touch it. She looked him in the eye. If I disappear, she said quietly, not politically, but completely, someone should know the whole truth. The words hung in the air like smoke. Padilla stared at her. You think this will happen to you? Kristi laughed. Not bitter, not sarcastic, just tired. Everything burns, eventually, she whispered. Even the liars. He finally picked up the letter. Didn't read it. Just held it. I still don't trust you, he said. She nodded. You shouldn't. Padilla stood. At the door, he paused. If you had one more moment, one more chance to speak, what would you say? Kristi looked away. Her voice came like a ghost. If I die tomorrow, she said, tell them I once tried to unchoose what I became. The door clicked shut behind him, and she was alone. Not with shame, not with fear, but with the beige silence of a woman who knew her story had already become someone else's. The press room was empty now. The chairs sat in perfect rows, silent witnesses to a story no one was sure how to finish. The podium stood untouched. No microphones, no cords, just the faint outline of where Kristi Noem's hand had once rested. The air carried a faint hum, the sound of fluorescent lights refusing to die. The camera was still there. Not live, not watched, just on. Its red light blinked slowly, patiently, like a heartbeat waiting to be noticed. Lila stood in the back, arms folded, notebook clutched to her chest. She had returned here not to report, but to remember. The echo of what had happened here wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It lingered, in the corners, beneath the floor tiles, in the places where lies had landed like dust. The letter from Noem had made its way into Lila's hands. Padilla had passed it to her with no introduction, just a nod, just a look that said, this is yours now. Inside the envelope was a confession, not the kind that wins awards, not the kind that saves reputations, just a handful of truths too late to matter. Noem had written, I told the lie before I even realized I'd made the choice. The words came easier than the truth. And then they lived on without me. Lila didn't publish it, not yet, because some truths needed to ferment in silence before the world could taste their bitterness. She walked to the podium now, placed her notebook down, pressed a button on the camera. The screen flickered to life. For a second, it played nothing. Then a recording began. Kristi Noem's voice, from that day, clear, controlled. This man lunged. Lila fast-forwarded, past the words, past the applause, past the lie, until there was only static. And then, something else, a sound buried under the noise. Hard to hear unless you were listening. The click of a camera shutter, the shift of a heel on linoleum. The breath someone took sharp, involuntary at the moment of silence that followed the arrest. Not the senator's, someone else's. Someone who had watched and regretted. Lila closed her eyes. That sound haunted her more than the speech. Because it was human. Because it was real. Because it was proof that even inside systems built to mute morality, someone had felt it, even if they said nothing. She stepped back, left the camera on, let it record an empty room, because sometimes silence tells the story better than voices ever could. The light outside the windows was fading, day turning to dusk. But inside, the red light on the camera blinked steadily, not angry, not afraid, just waiting, as if to say, I saw, I remember, I am still watching. And far away in the quiet of an empty church, Ruth Keegan lit a candle. In the back of a closed newsroom, Lila pressed upload. In a hallway deep within the Capitol, a janitor paused at the smudged outline of handprints on the wall, and without knowing why, left them untouched. And the camera kept blinking, even when no one was there. Even when the truth had no stage, even when the story had ended, its afterimage remained.